Nick Wallis is with us this morning, who's written the book, The Great Post Office Scandal. It's followed this right from the beginning, Nick. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. Alongside him, former sub-postmistress Wendy Buffrey.
Morning.
Very good morning to you, Wendy. Do you want, just so people understand, I always think it's worth it, can you explain a kind of a pre-seed version of what happened to you?
Yeah, I took on the post office in '98 and was fine until 2008. I had a couple of losses, but nothing huge other than one £8,000 one. And then I had a huge amount of stamps appear on my computer screen. And I did everything I was supposed to do to remove those, and it doubled the loss from 9,000 to 18.
When you say stamps, are they like alerts that...
No, actual physical books of 100 stamps.
Oh.
700 appeared on my screen from nowhere. And I hadn't got them in the post office. They hadn't been delivered, and I hadn't got them. And then when I tried to take them out again, it went up to £36,000. And that's when I thought, well, I just haven't got that many. I don't know what to do. And I rolled over without saying anything, as if I had that many.
Sorry, do you want to explain that phrase a little more? When you
rolled
say...
over when I did my end of month balance. It said I was £36,000 short. I didn't have that many. I knew that the post office would want that money, so I did the wrong thing, and I actually said I'd got it, and that was the beginning of the end for me. But I've since found out that had I actually told them that it had gone, I would still be in the same position as I am today.
Yeah, Wendy, I find it interesting you say you did the wrong thing, because what we know now is you were not in the wrong. You know...
She had a ghost discrepancy suddenly appear out of nowhere, and then she was held liable for £36,000. It's insane. Yes. And it's one of the most cut-and-dried cases.
Yeah, absolutely. And the consequence of that, in terms of the...
I had just over 18 months to wait without hearing anything, nothing at all. And then I got a letter through the post, along with my husband's special delivery letter, that had a proceeds of crime order in there, so they froze everything that we'd got. We couldn't do anything. And then I ended, 4 or 5 weeks after that, I had a summons to court, and I ended up with 150 hours community service and a fine, and my life being turned upside down.
How is your life now?
It's better than it was, but nothing, compensation, heartfelt thanks, which they've never ever managed, or apologies if they've never managed. It just, you can't stop what they've done to you. It still makes me ill. It still is there every minute of the day.
This devastation, Nick, that we've heard from you, Wendy, we've heard from so many sub-postmasters. This won't leave.
No.
This is, indelibly marked. You heard about this first when you were presenting a breakfast show for the BBC. Yeah. And I think there was one conversation you had, and then it just ramped up, and that kind of not piqued your interest, but made you more determined to look into this, which has been going on for years. What, 13 years you've been looking into this?
I first spoke to Devendra Misra at the time that his wife, Seema Misra, was in prison. She'd just been sentenced, and he said she was put in prison for a crime she didn't commit.
We've spoken to her on this programme.
And BBC Breakfast has been brilliant in following this story for so long and supporting the sub-postmasters, and it's just been this extraordinary journey over so many years. I mean, Alan Bates was fighting his ejection from the post office in 2003, and it took 16 years before anyone in authority, a High Court judge, finally turned around and said, this is a serious issue. Wendy got her conviction quashed in 2021, 3 years ago. She's still waiting for her full and final compensation to actually land. And I remember at the time when Wendy was interviewed, just as she was coming out of the courtroom, a bit emotional in floods of tears, and the one thing that she said is that it's the time. You can't get the time back. It doesn't matter how much money you get, it doesn't matter the fact you've got your name cleared. Lives have been ruined, and there's no way back from that. And so that's the most extraordinary thing about this scandal, the period of years that it took, and the fact that government, which owns the post office, fought for so long to deny these sub-postmasters justice, that makes it such a big scandal.
Wendy, we have, on a couple of occasions, had the privilege of talking to people like yourself who've been at the heart of this.
Yeah.
And a couple of thoughts have always occurred to me is, and as you explained just a moment ago, when you started to explain the mechanics of what happened, you can do that clearly and you can go through it. And then the other part of it is the emotional damage. And that is clearly, even sitting with you now, I can tell how hard that is, A, to explain, but just still maybe to say out loud. And hopefully now, because of the work that journalists like Nick have done, you feel bolder and you know, emboldened to be honest about those things, to say what it's felt like.
It's the fear, it's the not sleeping, it's... You just cannot explain to somebody that has not been through it how it feels. You know, and it's not just me, you know, everybody's family goes through it as well. You know, my close family have been so supportive, but you always feel as though you've let them down, even though you haven't done anything, because you've altered their lives. You know, it's because I made the decision with my husband to buy a post office, it altered our lives. Instead of being something that could take us through to retirement and be something, oh, I loved doing the job, you know, I really loved it. And it's gone. It's you know, it's just not there. And when you're found guilty of doing something that you didn't do, it completely, something inside you dies and it never comes back.
And what I think is remarkable, because Nick, you're now embarking on this tour next month.
Yes.
To tell the story. And we were chatting before, and Wendy, didn't you say, look, if someone doesn't turn up, I'll be your backup?
Yeah.
Because you are willing to talk about this story and make sure people hear it, because it's more than the television programme.
It is.
Wendy's a compelling talker. She really is. And I've sat in a room before where she's told her story to an audience who were just hanging off her every word. And I want to be able to go out on stage and give context to this scandal, because, of course, the drama can't cover everything. And talk about the facets and also bring people up to date, because I'll be on tour whilst the public inquiry restarts. But it's hearing from someone like Wendy who can just say, this happened to me, and this is why it's important, that really affects audiences. And I've been lucky enough, because this scandal happened to so many people. Everywhere I go around the country, I've been able to find a sub-postmaster who's willing, who's local to the area, who will come up on stage and talk about their experience. But Wendy, bless her, she said, look, if you don't fill any gaps in the schedule, I'll be there. And I'm very grateful to Wendy.
How have you found the public inquiry? Because obviously, you know, news organisations have been covering it, and we've seen various people give evidence from both sides.
You've seen lots of people be very, very forgetful. I just don't understand how people can come and give evidence and stand there and say, I don't know, I can't remember, I can't recall, I don't know. Especially when it's something that affects the fact that they might be brought before a court. Everything else, all of a sudden, they can remember straight away. And I find that difficult if they've gone in there and said, I'm going to tell the truth, and then not say anything because it might get them into trouble. I wish the inquiry had more teeth. I wish it could actually compel people to tell the truth rather than just say, oh, I don't remember.
Do you still, Wendy, have a sense... I noticed, and Nick, I know you've spoken to Wendy many times before. As I'm listening to Wendy, I'm thinking, it's quite often I feel like I've heard you blame yourself. Even now. Even given what we know, you're blaming yourself a moment ago for embarking on buying a post office or running a post office in the first place.
Yeah.
that feels like a burden on top of a burden. You're still questioning decisions you made for which there is no blame attached.
No, I know. It's mad, isn't it? When something like this happens to you, it just changes your outlook on everything. It really does, you know, and you just think, well, if I hadn't bought the post office, this wouldn't have happened. If I hadn't bought the post office, that wouldn't have happened. And it's just ongoing.
And it becomes a trap as well, because Wendy's spoken in the past very movingly about her mental health and how this legal action hanging over her and this sense of not trusting herself, because she didn't understand where this £36,000 deficit had come from. And I've spoken to many sub-postmasters about this. They start to doubt their own minds, because the post office said, well, there's nothing wrong with our IT system. You need to look at yourself.
Well, you're told by an authority that
absolutely,
you're wrong.
and it becomes a spiral of doubting your own sanity, doubting your own mind, doubting your own capability. And that then becomes really pernicious when you become trapped inside your own mental health.
Just on the tour, the reaction you've had when you're talking to people, it's quite remarkable, isn't it, when they're just like, how can I help?
Absolutely.
You know?
I mean, I was in the back room of a pub in Liverpool a couple of years ago, because I only started doing these talks because I couldn't get distribution on the book, because it was a tiny little publisher, and I thought, well, all right, I'll take the story into as many communities as I can. And I was talking in the back room of a pub 2 years ago in Liverpool. There were about 30 people in there, with the sub-postmaster on stage. 3 sub-postmasters from the area had come to listen, and I didn't realise this. They were in the audience. And at the end of it, this woman just was so outraged. She said, what can we do? How can we help? And I wasn't prepared for the question at all, because I just thought, well, I'll tell the story and off I go. And the sub-postmaster in the audience just said, tell as many people as you can. And that's why these evenings can be quite cathartic for the sub-postmasters on stage, but also to be believed, to have a receptive audience, to listen, because they spent so many years shut away from their communities and not having that opportunity.
And isolated, not knowing that anyone else was going
so
through it.
I don't want to say on the poster, this is an evening that will leave you quivering with rage, but sometimes that's the feeling in the room, where people become so outraged by what happened to so many people around the country.
Nick, thank you very much. Good luck with the tour.
Thank you.
Wendy, pleasure to meet you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for sharing your story.
And good luck.
Thank you.
To have the person there and hear their character and their voice, and to have a one-to-one question and answer